I was finishing the dawn irrigation run, coffee steaming in one hand, when the screech of tires shattered the quiet of our little valley ranch. Out of nowhere, the shiny HOA-issued SUV barreled straight through the slope, plowing over two perfect rows of young sweet corn before fishtailing to a stop beside my fence. My jaw dropped. So did the corn. The windshield wipers flapped uselessly like guilty hands trying to wipe away the mess. Out steps Janice, the brand new president of our homeowners association, the one who mailed everyone glossy flyers about community harmony. She didn't apologize. She didn't even notice the broken stalks brushing her heels. Instead, she waved a clipboard at me and shouted that my unauthorized agricultural expansion violates Section 8, Article 5. The woman was lecturing me about rule numbers while corn sap was still dripping from her bumper. Now, I'm a patient man, but those crops pay the mortgage and feed half the farmer's market. When Janice slammed her car door and demanded I sign a compliance form, something inside me snapped like a dry twig. I politely asked her to move the vehicle. She refused, revving the engine as if daring me to stop her. That's when an idea, wild, harmless but absolutely unforgettable, sparked in my mind. Remember the old cattle hoisting pulley on the front gate? With a little ingenuity, a length of tow strap, and a neighbor who owed me a favor, that forgotten contraption turned into the ultimate lesson in respect. By sunset, Janice's prized SUV was dangling 6 inches off the gravel like a Christmas ornament for everyone driving past the ranch road to admire. But here's the twist. Right as she rushed back screaming, the pulley pin let out a warning creak. In the next minutes, I had to choose: lower the car and face her fury, or trust. My rigging and make a point the HOA board would never forget. What happened when that pin finally gave way changed the whole neighborhood forever. To understand how things got this far, you've got to know a little more about Janice and the HOA around here. See, this neighborhood wasn't always run like a gated kingdom. Back when my folks built this ranch, it was wide open land. Neighbors helped neighbors, and fences were more about keeping cows in than people out. But things changed fast when the newer folks started moving in. Big houses, manicured lawns, and a board of rules longer than a seed catalog. Janice came in last year, all polished and full of energy. She got elected HOA President within 2 months and started cracking down on anything that didn't fit her vision. That meant no barn lights after 9 p.m., no roadside fruit stands, and definitely no unapproved planting. She even mailed out violation notices for kids leaving bikes on porches. So when she saw I'd expanded the garden closer to the road, on my own land, mind you, she must have decided to make an example out of me. What she didn't know was how personal those crops were. I started that patch with my daughter during the pandemic, just 2 rows at first. It grew into something bigger, kind of like therapy, kind of like survival, and we donated a lot of that food too. But none of that mattered to Janice. All she saw were non-compliant structures, encroachments, and her precious bylaws. So when she tore through my corn and tried to play boss with that smug clipboard, I figured it was time to remind her that respect is earned, not enforced. That SUV stunt? It wasn't about revenge. It was about sending a message without ever raising my voice. But as I stood there, listening to the pulley groan and watching her stomp toward me, red-faced and shouting threats about legal action, I started wondering, had I gone too far? Or was this exactly what it took to finally stand up to the HOA madness? Janice was still marching toward me like a storm in heels, barking into her phone, probably calling the sheriff or the HOA legal team. I kept my hands in my pockets, trying to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding. The SUV creaked again above us, swinging slightly in the breeze, and a few curious neighbors had started to gather by the fence line. Phones out, whispering. This wasn't just a ranch issue anymore. It was about to go neighborhood-wide. While she shouted about property damage and civil liability, All I could think about was last week's meeting at the community center. Janice had proposed a rule to limit unsightly farming practices near public view. Everyone knew it was aimed at me. I spoke up then, told them that what they called unsightly was what put fresh food on a lot of local tables. Some nodded. Others stayed quiet. But not Janice. She took it personal. And now here we were, my tractor pulley turning her luxury SUV into a lesson, and her face turning a deeper shade of red every second. The thing is, this wasn't just about corn or HOA rules anymore. There were deeper cracks showing. Take old. Mr. Ramirez down the road. He got fined for repainting his barn without prior approval. Or the Masons, who had their chicken coop flagged as a noise nuisance, even though it had been there for years. Everyone was starting to feel the squeeze, but no one wanted to be the first to push back. Until now, my neighbor Claire leaned over the fence and whispered, "You might have done what we all wanted to." But I wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. Because now Janice was pointing her phone camera at me, saying something about documentation, and I saw the HOA treasurer pull up in her Lexus, stepping out with that same tight-lipped expression. Whatever happened next, I knew it wouldn't just be between me and Janice. This was turning into something much bigger. By the time the HOA treasurer showed up, the crowd had nearly doubled. Some folks leaned against their trucks, arms crossed, pretending they were just passing by. Others stayed quiet, phones in hand, recording every second. No one was sure if this was turning into a full-blown HOA standoff, or just another day in the neighborhood, but you could feel it in the air. Something was about to give. Janice didn't stop filming. She circled the gate like a lawyer on TV, zooming in on the rigging straps and yelling that the SUV had been illegally detained. I could barely keep a straight face. I mean, detained? It wasn't like I stole the thing. She parked it on my land, crushed my crops, refused to move it. All I did was make sure it didn't leave until someone acknowledged what she did. But the HOA wasn't having it. The treasurer walked up to me and started reading from a printed packet. She said I was in violation of several bylaws, unauthorized, use of heavy equipment, obstruction of a vehicle, misuse of pulley systems. I didn't even know that last one was a rule. I asked if anyone cared about the crops, or the damage, or the fact that Janice literally trespassed. Crickets. Not one word about accountability. Just pages of rule citations. And then the sheriff pulled up. That's when everything changed. Blue lights flashing. Everyone froze. The deputy stepped out, calm but serious, hand resting near his belt. He walked slowly toward the gate, looked up at the dangling SUV, then looked at me. Janice rushed over, nearly tripping in the gravel, launching into a full speed rant about destruction of property and personal endangerment, but the deputy held up a hand. "Let's take this one step at a time," he said. Then he turned to me and asked, "Mind explaining how this all got started?" The crowd leaned in, phones raised a little higher. My mouth went dry. Because I knew what I said next could either settle the fire or pour gas on it. I took a breath and looked at the deputy. "She drove over my crops," I said, nodding, toward the broken rows behind the fence. Didn't stop, didn't apologize. Just told me I was violating some HOA rule and left her SUV in the middle of it all, so I moved it. Thought maybe she'd take the situation seriously if she saw what it felt like to have something of hers handled without permission. He nodded slowly, eyes scanning the pulley, the SUV, then Janice, who was fuming like a tea kettle about to blow. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, a second cruiser pulled up. Out stepped another officer, followed by a man in a pressed shirt and clipboard. I recognized him right away, Jeff Larkin, the county code enforcement inspector. Now, that was unexpected. Janice's face shifted from angry to smug in a flash. "I filed an emergency complaint," she said proudly. "He's here to assess the illegal structure and unpermitted crop expansion." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just an HOA issue anymore. They were trying to bring the county into it. Jeff walked around, checking the gate, the pulley, then motioning for someone to measure the distance from the crops to the road. He barely acknowledged me, like the whole thing was already decided. Then came the second twist. Claire, the neighbor who'd whispered support earlier, stepped forward, waving a manila folder. "Before anyone starts citing violations," she said loudly, "I think you should see this." Jeff took the folder, flipped it open. Frowned. Claire had printed copies of satellite images, clear proof that the garden rose had been there long before Janice's SUV made its debut. Not only that, but she'd dug up a zoning exemption that allowed small-scale agricultural use on our side of the development, something grandfathered in when the land was first sold. The tension snapped tighter than ever. The deputy raised an eyebrow. Janice's confidence faltered just a bit. The crowd grew quiet again, because now the question wasn't just whether I'd gone too far. It was whether Janice had just picked a fight she couldn't win. Jeff stood there silent, flipping through the folder Claire handed him. The tension in the air felt thick enough to chew. Janice crossed her arms, tapping her foot, clearly waiting for him to shut everything down in her favor. But then Jeff looked up, straight at her, and it all started on what seemed like a normal day in a small-town courthouse. The air was tense, typical for a courtroom, but no one expected what would happen next. A routine hearing was underway when a white police officer, clearly frustrated and on edge, lashed out at a black woman who had simply spoken up for herself. In a shocking moment, he kicked her out, literally. People gasped, phones came out, and the room froze. The woman stood tall, calm, and composed, while the officer stormed out, unaware that his life was about to be turned upside down. What he didn't know was that the woman he'd just disrespected wasn't just another citizen. She wasn't there for a case. She wasn't in trouble. In fact, she was about to become his boss. This story takes a sharp turn that no one saw coming. Behind the badge and the uniform, there are power dynamics, assumptions, and painful truths that often go unchecked. But this time, the truth wasn't just going to be seen, it was about to be felt. The woman, strong, professional, and full of quiet authority, wasn't there to argue. She had a job to do. And that job, taking over as the new police chief, of the very department this officer worked for. Now imagine being that officer. One moment you're abusing your power, the next you're standing face to face with the person who now holds power over you. The look on his face when he found out? Priceless. But the moment wasn't about revenge. It was about reckoning. And it was only the beginning. What happens next in this story challenges everything we think we know about justice, respect, and redemption. Will the officer face consequences? Will the new chief take a stand, or take the high road? Keep watching, because this story is just getting started. The courtroom slowly emptied, but the buzz didn't die down. People were whispering, texting, and rewatching the clip that had already made it to social media. Some still couldn't believe what they had seen. Others were angry, not just because of what happened, but because it felt like just another example of a deeper problem: racial bias, misuse of authority, and how Black women are so often disrespected even when they carry power. But let's rewind for a moment. Who was this woman, really? Her name is Angela Carter. She's not just any officer. She's a highly decorated law enforcement professional with over 15 years of experience. Known for her calm presence and sharp instincts, Angela had recently been selected as the new chief of police in this very city. What nobody realized was that she decided to quietly observe the court system before her first official day. No press, no announcement, just a woman watching how the system works from the inside. And what she saw? It shook her. Officer Daniels, the man who kicked her out, had a reputation. Not official complaints, but whispers. Stories from people who didn't want trouble. A cop quick to anger, quick to judge. Angela saw it all unfold right in front of her. No badge, no rank, just her word against his. And he didn't even pause to ask who she was. He didn't care. Angela didn't tell anyone who she was after the incident. Not the judge, not the clerk. She walked out quietly, head high, but something in her eyes said she had made a decision. Now the whole department was waiting. No one knew she had been in court that day. No one knew the viral video was about to land on her desk. And Officer Daniels? He was about to walk into a department meeting that would change everything. The next morning, the station was buzzing. No one knew exactly what was going on, but there were rumors. A meeting had been called, mandatory. That alone was unusual. Officers shuffled in, sipping coffee, making guesses. Some said a new policy rollout. Others whispered about the viral video that had been circulating all night. But no one had any idea that the woman in that clip was about to walk through the door and change everything. Officer Daniels sat in the back, arms crossed. He hadn't seen the video yet. He hadn't connected the dots. To him, it was just another day. He didn't even remember the woman's face clearly, just that she had annoyed him, and he reacted. No big deal in his mind. But a few of the other officers had watched the clip more than once. Some recognized her. A couple of them stared at each other in disbelief, slowly putting it all together. They didn't dare say it out loud, but their expressions said it all. That's her. Then the door opened. Angela Carter walked in. Confident, calm, dressed in full uniform now, badge shining. The room went silent. Daniel sat up straighter, suddenly, alert. He looked around, confused. Then their eyes met. It hit him. The color drained from his face. But Angela didn't flinch. She walked to the front, nodded at the deputy chief, and turned to face the room. What followed wasn't a dramatic speech. Not yet. It was introductions, standard protocol. But underneath her composed tone, there was tension. Everyone felt it. Some officers were curious. Others were nervous. A few were clearly uncomfortable. Angela was here not just to lead, but to clean house, and they all knew it. Meanwhile, in the background, pressure was building. Community leaders had caught wind of the video. News outlets were reaching out. The mayor's office wanted answers. And still, no one outside that room knew the full story. Not yet. Daniels wasn't the only one sweating. Because Angela's presence meant change was coming, and no one knew how deep it would go, or who else would be exposed along the way. Over the next few days, the station felt different, quieter, uneasy. Angela wasn't loud or confrontational. She didn't need to be. Her presence alone shifted the energy in every room she entered. She walked the halls, checked case files, spoke with officers one-on-one. Some welcomed her, others avoided her completely. But no one could ignore her. Officer Daniels tried to keep his head down. He started arriving early, leaving late, pretending everything was fine. But people were watching him. Whispers followed him wherever he went. The video hadn't just gone viral, it had sparked conversation across the city. Civil rights groups were calling for an internal review. Residents were showing up at City Hall, demanding transparency. And in the middle of it all was Angela Carter, now the face of both justice and controversy. Behind closed doors, Angela was gathering information. Daniel's personnel file, past body cam footage, statements from officers who had stories but never felt safe enough to speak. It wasn't just about the courthouse moment anymore. That had opened the door. But what lay behind it was bigger. An entire pattern of behavior, not just from one officer, but from a system that protected him. At the same time, Angela was facing pressure from the top. The mayor wanted this to go away quietly. A few city officials hinted that a public confrontation would make the department look bad. They wanted a clean image, not accountability. But Angela hadn't come for comfort. She came for change. Then came the turning point. A mandatory department review board meeting was scheduled. Daniels was ordered to appear. Angela would be there too, not just as the chief, but as the witness. The atmosphere in the department shifted from whispers to full-blown tension. Officers picked sides. Loyalties were tested, and Daniels, once arrogant, was now a man unraveling. As the boardroom doors closed behind them, no cameras, no crowd, just truth on the line, everyone was asking the same thing. What's going to happen now? The boardroom was heavy with silence. Angela sat at the head of the table, steady and focused. Officer Daniels avoided her gaze, fidgeting slightly, his usual confidence cracked. A few senior officials, some skeptical, others curious, looked on as the session began. This was supposed to be about one incident, the courtroom, but Angela had come prepared with more than anyone expected. She began calmly, detailing what happened that day in court. Her words were clear, measured. No drama, just facts. Then she paused, looked around the room, and dropped the first surprise. This wasn't the first time Daniels had acted out. She pulled out reports, real ones. Internal complaints that had been quietly closed. Testimonies from former trainees. Officers who had been transferred after pushing back. Suddenly, the room shifted. This was no longer about one officer losing his temper. This was about a pattern of behavior, and the people who had let it slide. Daniels's face turned red. He leaned forward, trying to defend himself, but the room wasn't buying it. Before he could even finish, Angela slid another folder across the table. That's when the second twist hit. Inside were transcripts and flagged emails, not from Daniels, but from a higher-up in the department. A supervisor who had shielded him, suppressed complaints, and helped cover his tracks. The same supervisor who had pushed back hardest against Angela's hiring. The real power behind the silence wasn't Daniels. It was someone above him. The room exploded in tension. Eyes shifted. The story had just gotten bigger. Now it wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about corruption, favoritism, and a chain of silence that stretched far deeper than anyone realized. Angela didn't flinch. She simply said, "If we want real change, it starts here." And just like that, what started as one shocking moment in a courtroom had become a battle for the future of the entire department. But the most intense moment was still to come, and no one, not even Angela, knew how it would end. The room sat in stunned silence as Angela's final file hit the table. It was no longer just about Officer Daniels or even the corrupt supervisor. It was about a culture that had been allowed to thrive unchecked. People shifted in their seats, eyes locked on her, some shocked, some quietly relieved. She had brought the receipts, and now there was no looking away. Daniels finally broke. Voice raised, hands shaking, he accused,